defend the idea that Biden should stay in the race?
Yeah. Let me first give you a broad perspective, and then I'll zero in, if that's okay.
Yep.
My broad perspective is I've been saying this for years, and this recent events prove it. Republicans have no principles. Democrats have no spine. Republicans have no principles. They have united like a herd of sheep behind a candidate, Donald Trump, who is trying to con and gaslight his way into the White House. His entire debate performance was based upon lies, one lie every 1 minute to 20 and 30 seconds. Moreover, they've united behind a candidate who's a convicted felon, who a civil jury found had sexually assaulted, colloquially raped a woman, defamed her and hurt her, who a civil jury had found he committed massive financial fraud. He ran a fraudulent charity just designed to enrich himself, a fraudulent university, Trump University, a fraudulent institute, Trump Institute, and he has promised to govern as a dictator. He said, "I'll be a dictator only on day one." Well, in the history of the world, every dictator on day one has been a dictator forever. So this is what the unprincipled Republican parties are uniting behind just to gain power. On the other hand, the Democrats have no spine. As soon as there's some adversity, they are willing to throw not just the elected president, but the elected party nominee. He wasn't selected by polls. 87% of those who voted in Democratic primaries voted for Joe Biden. And they are now throwing Joe Biden under the bus. Not only Democratic Party operatives and elected officials, but also, pundits and journalists, liberals who generally support Biden, like the New York Times or the Atlanta Constitution. And what this entire crew has in common is zero track record in predicting election results. Yet these folks claim to know what the Democrats need to do to be predicted winners based upon nothing, based upon no scientific model of how elections really work. But let's look at the keys. And I'm not going to make any medical judgment about Joe Biden, because I'm not a physician. And even physicians who haven't examined him very closely shouldn't be making judgments, just what they see in the debate. Mm-hmm. But I will say, debate skills, quickness, it's not irrelevant, but it's way down the list on what counts to be a good president. What's far more important are your values, your experience, your judgment. And if Biden is so terribly impaired, why has he run such a successful presidency? More domestic accomplishments than any president since the 1960s. It was Biden and Biden alone who had the courage and the wisdom and the experience to put together the coalition of the West that stopped Putin from conquering Ukraine. He may now be on the verge of an extraordinary achievement, brokering a ceasefire and hostage release in Gaza. And yet somehow, a bad debate performance, gaffes, and stumbles. You know, when Biden was running for president in the 1980s, decades ago, he made gaffes and stumbles. That's who he is. It's not just a sign of age. Of course, he has slowed down, but that's, who he is, and it's who he always been. Now, let's look at the situation with respect to the keys to the White House. Remember, 6 keys that are negative, and the Democrats, no matter who's running, are predicted losers. Biden checks off 2 keys, incumbency and party contest. That means 6 of the remaining keys would have to fall to predict his defeat. Biden drops out, and there isn't a consensus successor. They lose both those keys, and only 4 more keys would have to fall. That's why I've argued that all of these folks who have no understanding of how elections really work and no track record in prediction are leading the Democrats down the primrose path of error. But I do have a plan B if you want to talk about that.
Can I ask you, do you think the media's reaction to the debate was worse than the actual debate itself? Do you think that kind of inflamed things? The media all running these headlines about Biden's age, Biden's age?
I think you put your finger right on the problem.
Yeah.
The media has been absolutely complicit in Donald Trump. If Donald Trump is elected, he owes his good fortune to a good part of the media. The media made a choice to focus on Biden's stumbles and bumbles. That would be a legitimate thing to focus on. But they totally ignored the far worse debate, the far more dangerous debate from Donald Trump. Donald Trump tried to lie his way into the presidency. One lie every 1 minute and to 20 to 30 seconds of speaking time. Huge lies, like he had ordered 10,000 National Guard to protect the Capitol. False, like Nancy Pelosi turned that down. False, Nancy Pelosi has nothing to do with protecting the Capitol. Keeps repeating the biggest lie of all, that he really won the 2020 election. He told us prices have gone up 400%. They've only gone up 25%. I can go on and on. And he refused to accept the results of a fair election and said his presidency would be devoted to being an authoritarian and going after his enemies. Why wasn't that the story? At least equal. I'm not saying it should have been the only story. Instead, by a factor of at least 10 to 1, the stories have focused on Biden.
They disproportionately. Yeah, it was incredibly disproportionate. Yeah.
It's not just the evil people who wreak havoc on this world. It's the good people who don't do enough to stop them. And if Donald Trump gets elected, you know what? All these people in the press are going to find that their free press freedoms are going to be gone, because Donald Trump will not tolerate it. And remember, he now has a free hand to do anything he wants. You know, Richard Nixon said in 1977 after Watergate, if the president does it, it's not illegal. And the whole country erupted in outrage. Of course, that's not true. The president is not a king. Now he is a king, according to the Supreme Court. He can do anything he wants, as long as it's part of his core constitutional responsibilities, which include, of course, being commander-in-chief of the armed forces. We can deploy the armed forces any way he wants. He could shoot protesters. He could declare martial law. He could shut down the press, like actually Abe Lincoln did during the Civil War, shut down some presses. And even non-core duties, he still has a presumption of immunity. So you combine what the Supreme Court has done with what Donald Trump has said. He's right on the open. You don't have to, dig into what Donald Trump is all about. And we have the clearest blueprint in the 235 history of our republic for the destruction of a democratic republic and turning the United States into a Russia or a Hungary. And believe me, all those in the press who are complicit with Trump are going to be very, very, very sorry.
Yep, the Hungary Viktor Orban model is the one that Donald Trump is going for, and he doesn't learn from his mistakes a lot, but we know that he's going to learn from his mistakes and only put loyalists around him. He doesn't want someone like Mike Pence who's going to stop him from stealing the election. But I guess what I would want to see Biden do the week after the debate was get out there, campaign relentlessly, do like a Fox News town hall and go into the enemy's territory. And he's kind of done a few appearances, but I guess I want to know, how does Biden rejuvenate his campaign? And also, can you lay out your plan B for us? Because I am curious about your plan B.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. Biden has to get out there and not just in scripted situations. The problem is, like with the George Stephanopoulos interview, these same folks who are complicit with Donald Trump are nitpicking every little piece. He makes a stumble, he garbles a word or two. Meanwhile, Trump couldn't even remember the name of his own doctor.
You shave your head, or if you're thinking about shaving your head, having the right tool is super important. I've tried every single traditional razor on the market. I've tried it.
Confused Nancy Pelosi and Nikki Haley, and that doesn't matter because Biden looks older. But he needs to do what Franklin Roosevelt did in 1932. Remember, Franklin Roosevelt had a severe disability, crippled from polio. But in those days, it wasn't a disability. You are a cripple and you are incapable of functioning. And what did he do in his 1932 campaign? Even though his advisors said, don't campaign, we don't want people to see a disability, a criminal. He said, nuts, I'm going to do a vigorous campaign and prove I'm up to the presidency, and that's exactly what Joe Biden needs to do. Plan B, the only other plan that elects a Democrat. Let's say the pressure is so great that they force Biden out. What he has to do then is not just step aside from the campaign, that's not good enough. He's got to resign the presidency for the good of the country. Look, if he can't run a campaign, how is he going to run the country anyway for the next 6 months? It's an absurd position. So it says, I'm resigning the presidency for the good of the country, drawing a great contrast with Donald Trump, who only does things for the good of Donald Trump. Harris becomes president. Biden instructs all of his delegates to support Harris as the candidate, and that would not be hard now that she's the sitting president, and they would still take off the incumbency and the contest key and still be in an excellent position to win the presidency. The worst thing they can do is force Biden out and then have a big brawl. You know, I've heard, oh, we're going to have another primary, it's going to be so great. Nonsense. You know, they'll lose both keys. But step aside from the keys. Just look at history. Adam, how many times since the turn of the 20th century, over 120 years, has the party holding the White House ever won when it's an open seat, the incumbent's not running, and you have a contested or uncertain nomination? The answer is never. So what these fools want to do is recreate exactly the same conditions from 2016, no incumbent party fight, that led to the election of Donald Trump in the first place. Now they want to recreate the conditions to lead to the re-election of Donald Trump. It's the problem with, you know, prognosticating off the top of your head, thinking you know what's electable without having a scientific basis. We've been down this road before with the Democrats. You know, many times they've said, we've nominated a really electable candidate, someone with a track record, someone who's experienced, you know, someone who's not too radical, someone like Mike Dukakis, the governor of Massachusetts in '88, or John Kerry, the great senator in 2004, or Hillary Clinton, you know, the former first lady, senator, secretary of state. And what do all of those candidates have in common, Adam? They all lost. So these people who think they know what's electable have no idea and no clue. You know, for the most part, it's been the off-the-wall, unexpected Democrats who've won, for the most part. Right, Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. No one ever heard of those folks a few years before the election.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, what's the argument for Biden having the charisma key over Donald Trump? Obviously, I loathe Donald Trump, but if I were to remove myself from someone who's like super politically active, and I put myself in my like frat bro friend's shoes, who's just barely pays attention, he probably thinks that Donald Trump has more charisma at this very moment. He'd be wrong, but what's the argument for the people thinking that Biden has more charisma?
Well, you got to read my book, Predicting the Next President, The Keys to the White House 2024. And it actually gives the criteria for each key, including the 2 charisma keys and every other key. You know, these keys may look a little subjective, but they're not once you properly define them. When you look at my book, they're very carefully defined. Plus, the book shows the answers going all the way back to 1860. So the next answer has to be consistent. Also, if you want to follow the keys and ask questions about them, check out my live show on YouTube every Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find it by looking up at Alan Lichtman YouTube, A-L-L-A. So, the charisma keys are not in comparison to one another. The charisma keys are defined as a candidate who is one of these once-in-a-generation, broadly inspirational candidates. And I don't think there'd be much argument about who they have been. They're very rare. Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama in 2008. Not much argument. That's over 120 years. Clearly, Biden is not an FDR. And Donald Trump, on the other hand, is not a Reagan. You know, he's a great showman. But remember, the criterion is broadly appealing. Ronald Reagan won 2 elections in popular vote landslides. There were lots of Reagan Democrats. Donald Trump lost 2 elections by 10 million votes. And I have yet to find very many Donald Trump Democrats. So he doesn't fit the criterion of being broadly appealing. That's why neither Biden nor Trump qualify. And I don't think that's controversial.
Yeah, I just have one more question for you because I know you're on vacation. I don't want to hold you too long. I feel like we could talk all day about Project 2025, Trump's threat to democracy, but someone in chat was asking, what about this Open Labs poll that leaked from the Democratic side over the weekend that apparently showed Biden down in swing states? You don't trust that poll?
You know, as I said, polls are snapshots. They are not predictors. All the polls showed Hillary Clinton was going to win. The eminent polling consortium at Princeton University, one of America's great universities, not quite up to the level of my alma mater, Harvard, but still very good, headed by the eminent political scientist Sam Wang. And they told us, Hillary, this is right before the election, not 4 months ahead of time, Hillary Clinton had a 99% chance to win. That's about as high as you get. And Ryan said, I'll eat a bug on national television if I'm wrong. And sure enough, he ate that bug. But the keys to the White House, of course, predicted Trump. After the first debate, you know, everyone says, this is the worst debate ever. Well, not according to the poll, if you want to believe polls, you know, which these guys, you know, are swearing by. According to the CNN Snap poll, yes, Biden lost the debate, but not as catastrophically as, you know, the media and the critics tell us. It was 67-33. In the first debate against Mitt Romney, Obama lost the debate 72% for Romney to 20% for Obama. And we saw some of the same headlines, you know, Democrat panicking, campaign in free fall. And the polls switched. The likely voter poll switched from plus 8% for Obama to plus 4% for Romney. A 12-point swing, much bigger than any of the swings we've seen this time. And all the pundits were pronouncing, you know, Obama dead, anointing Romney. So you want to live with the polls, you're also going to die with the polls. Plus, there's so much yet to come. What if Biden does get the ceasefire and the hostage release? You know, that could fundamentally change the polls. You know, what if we get a mini trial in Washington? Maybe not the final trial, but a trial that brings out all the evidence about Donald Trump trying to steal the election in order to, you know, decide whether he's immune or not. What if he's sentenced to prison in September in New York? There's so much yet to come. That's why snapshot polls don't mean very much. Plus, I just saw it today, a big headline in Newsweek, which said, swing state polls are big post-debate disappointment for Trump. Basically, they showed Biden ahead in some, like Wisconsin and Michigan, Trump ahead in some, like North Carolina and Arizona, but essentially, you know, a point or two separating Biden and Trump about a week after the election. And that's before all these other things might happen.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of people do say that the event that will decide the outcome of the election hasn't yet happened. I mean, if you look at 2016, a lot of the events came in October as an October surprise. The Comey letter, even like the Access Hollywood tape, I believe, came in October. So there's so much that can still happen. The event that could decide the election may not have happened yet. But yeah, any final words, Professor Lichtman? I really appreciate your time. I don't want to take up too much of it. I know you on vacation, you've got some running to do.
Sure, I'll wrap this up. Forget the polls, forget the pundits. They lead you down the primrose path of error because they have no scientific basis for their analyses. Focus on the big picture as gauged by the keys, which demonstrate that the worst thing the Democrats could do would be to bump Biden off the ticket and have a brawl for the nomination based on the keys and history. That's a recipe for defeat. Democrats need to stick with their elected nominee. Remember, we don't vote according to polls, we vote according to elections. And if for some reason Biden is pushed out, the only alternative is Plan B, resign the presidency for the good of the country. After all, if you can't run a campaign, how you gonna run the country? Harris becomes president, she becomes the consensus nominee, and we have a situation where she checks out incumbency and contest key on the polls. And historically, instead of a situation where the party in the White House has never won, we have a situation where the party holding the White House has won at least 75% of the time.
Us in. The FBI says Chinese hackers are preparing